Hi, Premier Furey. Good to see you.
Good to see you
I
again.
appreciate you making the time.
Happy to.
How much of a sigh of relief are you breathing over the fact that we don't have an announcement at this point around tariffs? Should we read anything into that?
Well, look, I think today could be a lot worse.
Yeah.
And I think we have a reprieve, but we should in no way, shape, or form take our eye off the ball, which is to have no tariffs. I think the signal today from the President of the United States was he's contemplating tariffs. So now it's incumbent upon all of us as leaders across Canada, industry leaders, political leaders, to come together with a plan to ensure that the President and his sphere of influencers understand the impact that this will have, not just on the economy of the United States, but on families in the United States. The microeconomic impacts of this will be devastating to families. And you heard him speak today about the cost of living. And I can tell you, tariffs to Canadian imports will hurt the cost of living in the United States, regardless of what we do with energy.
We also heard him and his Commerce Secretary, though, reference the utility in their view of tariffs, in particular in offsetting revenue decreases elsewhere through tax cuts, for example. They talk about the External Revenue Agency. Like, it's clear that they don't just want more border security, they see a purpose in tariffs. How much harder does that make so-called Team Canada's job in trying to convince them not to use them?
Well, I think we can still fit in the international narrative that they're developing, and that they are looking at every country around the world. They're not just looking at Canada. And when you look at the numbers that have been provided, I think we have a strong argument to be made that there isn't a proportionally large trade deficit that exists between the two countries. In fact, if you take energy out, perhaps there's a surplus. So I think it's important for us to continue to talk with our counterparts, to continue to influence his sphere of decision makers in what he said now is going to be a research period, to ensure that they have the right information, that Canada wants to be a friend, that Team Canada wants to be a friend in his energy development. He said today that they're in an energy crisis. Well, guess what? Newfoundland and Labrador, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Canada at large can be a real part of his solution moving forward.
We spoke a few minutes ago with Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith, who was advocating for more of that positive messaging in the next little while they make their determinations versus threatening counter tariffs. Last week we spoke about the discord between herself and other premiers about what you should say or shouldn't say in that vein. What is your view on whether or not at this point in time we should continue talking about countermeasures?
Well, it's no different than it was last week, except today we have the piece of information we didn't have last week, which is that there are no tariffs today. Mm-hmm. So we have to be prepared so that we're not having the 11th hour conversation when the President 8 weeks from now wakes up and decides to do tariffs or not do tariffs. I think right now is the time for us to have a full Team Canada approach, to let them know exactly how beneficial our partnership has been and will continue to be, for him to meet his agenda economically for Americans.
Do you think that'll work? And I ask because, again, we've seen yourself and other politicians at all levels of government, business leaders, essentially tried to make that case. And it's not like today they announced, a reprieve on tariffs for a while because we've really been convinced by the fact that this could cost us more. They just want to study something more that they continue to defend. Like, can the argument land in your view?
I believe it can. When you look at the trade deficit that exists between the United States and Canada, again, I think as Canadians we're looking at this in isolation, but the Americans are looking at this on as a global front. We're looking at this from a bilateral lens. And I think we can win that argument. I think because the facts are true with respect to the raw materials and energy, with respect to the deficit, the trade deficit. So I think we can win that argument. I think it can be a message of positivity in the trade relationship that has existed for centuries. And we need to make sure that we're down here, like today, ensuring that Americans, key decision makers, leaders understand the macro and the microeconomics of the impact that tariffs will have on Americans.
Are we speaking with one voice? Like, is there a true Team Canada approach in spite of our conversation last week and the fact that Alberta's Premier would like to see a different approach?
Well, I'm not sure she wants to see a different approach. She didn't sign on to a letter. I've never pretend to speak for her, but she's standing up for her jurisdiction. And look, I'm an oil and gas producer. Do I think the federal government should get rid of emissions caps? Yes. Do I think that they should be pro-resource developed? Yes. Do I think we should be drilling more and producing more oil and gas because we have a secure supply? We have a more legally ethical supply of oil and gas. We have a cleaner petroleum product, a lower carbon emitting petroleum product off our shores in Newfoundland and Labrador. Absolutely I do. But I think those conversations need to be had behind closed doors and not front facing to Americans.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Premier, appreciate your time as always.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.